Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Crystal Rogers. Crystal Rogers, a 35-year-old mother of 4 from Bardstown, Kentucky, was known for her strong devotion to her children. She and her ex-husband Keith shared custody of their children. Despite the divorce, she maintained a friendly relationship with him for the sake of the children. At the time, her 2-year-old youngest son was with her current boyfriend, Brooke's Houck. On July 5, 2015, Crystal's mother, Ballard, became worried when Crystal didn't respond to her phone calls. Crystal was a reliable and responsible who always responded to her calls, but this time Crystal was unresponsive. As the hours passed, Sherry's worry intensified, and after 24 hours without hearing from her daughter, she realized something was amiss. Sherry's instincts as a mother told her that Crystal's absence was unusual. She tried contacting Crystal multiple times, but her efforts were in vain. Sherry then reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone might know where she was, but no one had seen or spoken with her recently. Around the same time, Crystal's younger sister Brooke contacted Sherry, informing her mother that she too had been unable to reach Crystal. This makes Sherry even more worried and insecure. Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks, told her family that he had not seen her since Friday. He last saw her playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When he woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone. Brooke suspected she might have visited her cousin's house for the 4th of July celebrations. However, Crystal's mother, Sherry, became increasingly worried as she couldn't reach her daughter. She reported Crystal missing to the police department. While she was there, her son Casey received a call from a friend saying Crystal's car had been seen on the side of the road. This news alarmed Casey and his father, Tommy Ballard. They knew Crystal wouldn't voluntarily leave her car. When they arrived at the location, they found her car with a flat tire. This only deepened their concern, as they knew Crystal would have asked for help if she had car trouble. Casey and Tommy were puzzled as to why Crystal would stop the car to fix it herself. When they looked into the car, they noticed that Crystal's keys, phone, and wallet were still on the passenger seat. This discovery made them even more worried, as Crystal was not someone who would leave her belongings behind. The fact that her personal belongings were still in the car made her disappearance seem even more suspicious and unusual. After discovering Crystal's car on the Bluegrass Parkway, her father and brother immediately contacted the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found no signs of struggle, but one thing caught their attention: the driver's seat was positioned in a way that would have been uncomfortable for someone of Crystal's height, suggesting that someone else may have driven her car. The authorities continued to investigate and asked for help from potential witnesses. However, no one came forward with any useful information. The police then decided to use the media to appeal for public assistance in finding Crystal. They released her photo and asked for the public's help, but unfortunately, no one provided any significant leads. Tommy, Crystal's father, arranged search parties to find Crystal. The hot and humid weather made the searches challenging. Despite a large turnout, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks, was absent. This made the police suspicious of his attitude. He seemed unconcerned about her disappearance. When questioned by detectives, Brooks provided an alibi, stating that Crystal and their young son had visited his family's farm the previous evening. They supposedly returned home around midnight, after which Brooks went to bed. He claimed Crystal stayed awake, engaged with her phone, playing games, as was her habit. In the morning, at 7 a.m., Brooke said their son was in bed with him, but Crystal was gone. Crystal's family initially suspected she might have gone out with her cousin. But those close to her dismissed this idea since she would never leave her 2-year-old son behind. Crystal's younger sister, Brooke, believed Crystal was planning to leave her partner, Brooks. According to Brooke, This was because Brooks had been dishonest with Crystal and lack of emotional attachment. Crystal told her mother, Sherry, that she wanted to leave Brooks. She said one of the main reasons was his controlling behavior towards her. Casey, Crystal's brother, had recently witnessed tension between Brooks and Crystal, including several heated arguments. The police asked Brooks to come in for questioning and take a polygraph test, but the results are not clear. Afterward, Brooks participated in a formal interview with the police. Detectives obtained video footage confirming details of Brooks' story. A video showed his truck entering the family farm, and later footage showed the vehicle leaving the property around midnight. However, because the windows of Brooks' truck were dark, police were unable to identify the occupants at the time. Brooks spent time at his parents' farm doing chores and setting a fire to burn some building materials. After for the fire to die down, he drove home. During a police interview, Brooks was questioned about a brief 13-second phone call he made to Steve Lawson, a business associate, while driving home. Brooks offered to have Steve explain the call to the police and asked him to call them during the interview. Steve claimed he called Brooks to get some phone numbers for a rental property, but Brooks said he needed to get home first and ask Crystal, who handled such matters. However, the police found Lawson's explanation suspicious, as it seemed rehearsed. The police were puzzled by this response, considering Brooks was with Crystal at the time of the call. They questioned why Brooks couldn't simply hand Crystal the phone, allowing her to discuss the issue immediately, rather than waiting to talk to her in person later. During Brooks's interview, his brother Nick, a Bardstown Police Department officer, called him with urgent advice to leave the interrogation room immediately. The police had doubts about their initial theory that Crystal had abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway and ran away. Instead, they suspected that something had happened to Crystal while she was at the Brooks family farm. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance progressed, several people reported seeing Brooks's truck and Nick's police car at his family farm to the police. This led detectives to believe that the brothers might have been at the farm to dispose of evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. To learn more, the police brought in Brooks's brother, Nick, for questioning. They confronted him with eyewitness accounts placing that him at the farm on July 8 and asked him to explain his emergence there. Nick initially claimed he had no knowledge of the incident surrounding Crystal's disappearance and denied being present that night. The police continued questioning him, directly asking if he and Brooks had tampered with or hidden evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. Nick strongly denied any involvement and assured them that, as a police officer, he would never aid in covering up a crime. The police then asked Nick to submit to a polygraph test, which he agreed to. However, he failed to answer truthfully to two key questions: whether he knew Crystal's current location and if he was withholding information about her disappearance. Despite failing the polygraph test, Nick insisted that he was telling the truth. On October 15th, investigators identified Brooks as the primary suspect in Crystal's disappearance. The same day, Brooks's brother, Nick, was terminated from the Bardstown Police Department for interfering with the investigation. Although the police were pretty sure they knew who the culprit was, they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. The police were concerned that if they took their suspect to court without sufficient evidence, the suspect might be acquitted. If that happened, they couldn't charge the suspect with Crystal's murder again. Due to the double jeopardy law. To help find more evidence, the FBI, Kentucky law enforcement agencies, Crystal's friends and family, volunteers, and missing people organizations conducted thorough searches at the Brooks family farm. The lengthy search left her loved ones terrified and desperate for news. As the search continued, her family remained hopeful that she would be found alive and well. At the Brooks family farm, investigators searched the ashes of a fire and, although they did not find any human remains, they did find pieces of clothing. Unfortunately, they were unable to link these clues to Crystal's case. The police executed multiple search warrants at the Brooks family farm, focusing on their cars and residences. However, these searches failed to yield significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's disappearance. A $100,000 reward was offered for any information that could help find Crystal, but unfortunately, no one stepped forward with any tips despite this large incentive. Tommy, Crystal's father, took it upon himself to investigate his daughter's disappearance, following every lead he received, no matter how small or insignificant it may have seemed. His determination was unwavering, driven by his love for Crystal. Unfortunately, Tommy had already faced a devastating loss in his family. In January 1979, his pregnant sister was brutally murdered by her husband and his accomplice. The perpetrators shot and beat her, set her remains on fire, and scattered them on a farm. Although it took years, the suspects were eventually arrested, found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison. Tommy remained committed to finding out what happened to his daughter Crystal, despite the many challenges he faced. He conducted his own investigation, canvassing the neighborhood, conducting interviews, and reaching out to anyone who might have information about his daughter's disappearance. To aid in his search, Tommy also utilized his own savings to hire private investigators and cadaver dogs. To keep track of the investigation, Tommy carefully documented every tip every clue he found. He worked with the police, sharing his discoveries and asking for their advice. November 2016, Tommy took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, on a hunting trip on their property early in the morning. As they left, Tommy's wife Sherry watched them go, feeling uneasy. She couldn't help but pray for their safety in the woods. Sherry tried to calm down after they left, but her peace was short-lived. Just minutes later, she received a frantic phone call from her grandson, Crystal's son. His voice shook with fear. He then exclaimed, "Mimo, Papa has been shot." Sherry's world came crashing down. Her nephew's panicked voice on the phone told her something terrible had happened. She quickly threw on some clothes and rushed to call 911, and she reassured her distressed grandson that help was on the way. Her mind was flooded with fears of what might have happened to her husband, Tommy. When Sherry arrived at the scene, she witnessed a horrifying sight: her husband lying on the ground, unresponsive. Distraught, she rushed to his side and tried to wake him up, hoping he would respond. But her efforts only revealed a grim truth: blood was pouring out of his nose. The officers and bystanders at the scene quickly pulled her away so that the medical team could try to save him, but it was too late. Tommy was pronounced dead. The initial police reports suggested that Tommy's death was the result of a hunting accident. However, Sherry knew this could not be true. She was adamant that her husband had been murdered, and she made her feelings clear to the authorities. "This is no accident," she insisted. "This is she husband, and it's a murder, and you know it." During the investigation, the investigators was found that Tommy's own gun had not been used, making it unlikely that he had committed suicide. The investigators then determined that Tommy's 11-year-old grandson was not involved in the shooting. As the investigation progressed and more facts came to light, Sherry's suspicion that her husband's death was indeed a murder gained credibility. The Kentucky State Police have informed the public that they are treating Tommy Ballard's death as a murder. The Tommy family believes that he was killed because he was getting close to discovering what happened to his missing daughter, Crystal. They think the people responsible for Crystal's disappearance felt threatened by Tommy's investigation and had him murdered to prevent the truth from coming out. In 2022, the FBI conducted a 5-day investigation into Crystal's disappearance. Investigators returned to the Brooks family farm to search for more evidence, with the goal of gathering enough information to hold suspects for Crystal's disappearance accountable. In October 2022, the FBI confirmed that it would analyze all evidence collected at its lab in Quantico. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance continued, the Kentucky Attorney General appointed a special prosecutor to help prosecute criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy. Crystal's mother, Sherry, was aware of and fully supported the decision to appoint a special prosecutor. She believed the move was necessary to ensure justice for her husband and daughter, and she viewed the appointment as a positive development that brought new perspective and expertise to the case. The decision to appoint a special prosecutor also showed that the case was being taken seriously and that those responsible would be held accountable. On September 2023, authorities arrested Crystal's boyfriend, Brooke Houck, and charged him with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The court set Brooke's bail at $10 million and prohibited him from contacting Crystal's family members. Notably, Brooke was previously arrested in 2022 for multiple traffic offenses and was released after paying a series of fines. When Brooke was arrested for Crystal's murder, many in Bardstown brought a sense of relief. While the confirmation of Crystal's death was devastating, the community was relieved to know that justice was being pursued, bringing some sense of closure to the case. 1 month after his arrest, in October 2023, Brooke appeared in court for the first time, though virtually rather than in person. The judge inquired if the special prosecutor, Shane Young, was investigating other cases related to Crystal's case. The prosecutor confirmed that they were looking into the death of Tommy, Crystal's father, and suspected a connection between the two murders. Notably, Shane Young believed they had obtained the gun used to kill Tommy. The firearm was reportedly purchased from Nick, who allegedly used an alias during the transaction. Preliminary investigations revealed that the caliber of the rifle matched the one used in Tommy's shooting. Shane Young stated that they were examining the gun based on 5 key criteria. So far, the results have matched 4 of these criteria, suggesting a possible link between the firearm and Tommy's murder. Crystal's grandfather felt relief when the special prosecutors, Shane Young, connected the 2 murders in court. They hoped for a swift and fair outcome in both cases. However, when questioned about the allegations by Shane Young, Brooke's mother refused to answer any questions. During the court hearing, the prosecutor alleged that the Brooks family had secretly recorded the grand jury proceedings. The prosecutor claimed that several family members Brooks were involved in this activity. Brooks' attorneys requested that the Nelson County judge be removed from the case, citing bias. They claim that the judge has had a hostile view of Brooks since 2017. The attorneys also argued that the $10 million bail is excessive and should be reconsidered. Attorneys representing Brooks argued that having a biased judge hear the case would be unfair to him. The lawyers argued that the judge's previous statements and actions showed that he was unfair. They asked the court to remove the judge and quickly appoint a new judge to ensure a fair trial. The Kentucky Appeals Court has recently made 2 key decisions. Firstly, Brooks will remain in jail with a $10 million bond. Secondly, the court has denied a request to remove the judge presiding over Brooks's trial. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive, and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters, and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex Skeel fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steph, and is expecting their child. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family soon after her birth, and her mother, Shannon, moved back in with grandparents. When Kirsten was 2 years old, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon remarried, but the marriage was short-lived, leaving Shannon to care for her 2 young daughters alone. Kirsten, being the older sibling, took on a lot of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger sister, Faith. Kirsten and Faith shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the adjacent room. On May 13, 1997, Shannon put her daughters to bed as usual. Kirsten was 8 years old, and Faith was 3. However, Faith had already fallen asleep, so Shannon only said goodnight to Kirsten and left the door to their room slightly open, as she always did, in case Kirsten or Faith needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon was awoken by a noise coming from the girls' room. Thinking one of her daughters was awake, Shannon got out of bed to check on them. As she approached the door, the noise stopped. Assuming her daughters had gone back to sleep, Shannon was about to return to her room when she noticed that the door to their room was now completely closed. This was unusual, as she was certain she had left it slightly open. She wondered if one of them had closed the door or if she had simply forgotten to leave it open. Shannon opened the door slightly to check, but she didn't enter the room before returning to bed. Shannon went to wake up her daughters at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but only found Faith in their bedroom. Shannon asked Faith where Kirsten was, and when Faith said she didn't know, Shannon began a thorough search of the house. However, Kirsten was nowhere to be found. Shannon then checked outside the house and contacted the parents of Kirsten's friends to see if she had come to their house. But no one had seen her. Shannon's search efforts led her to call her father, who lived nearby, to see if Kirsten had gone to his house or not. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen her either. At this point, Shannon realized Kirsten was missing, and her father advised her to call the police. When the police arrived, they initially thought Kirsten might be hiding in the house or had simply wandered off for a walk, given the town's low crime rate. However, upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. This raised their suspicions that something more serious had occurred. Further investigation led them to discover a piece of children's underwear stained with blood on the ground outside the window. After confirming with Shannon that the underwear belonged to Kirsten, the police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping. More officers were called to the scene to assist with the investigation, which marked the beginning of a more extensive search for Kirsten. The police investigation into Kirsten's disappearance began with a search of the area around the house. During this search, the police spoke with Kirsten's mother, who reported hearing a noise at 3 a.m. and now realized that it may have been the sound of her daughter being taken. Despite the search, nothing suspicious was found, and the police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with all the residents. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of the abduction. However, one neighbor did mention being woken up by a barking dog around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. With no solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to interview Faith, who was only 3 years old. Despite her young age, Faith was able to share what she had witnessed, but her statement was limited to a single phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but unfortunately, it did not provide any further information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother, Shannon, had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. The investigation into Kirsten's disappearance continued, with detectives initially speaking to Shannon, her mother. Shannon denied any involvement, claiming to have been clean from substance abuse for some time and insisting she would never harm her daughter. Although detectives were not convinced of Shannon's innocence, they could not find any evidence to prove her involvement. The police then turned to the public for help, using the media to ask for any information that might be relevant to the case. In response, they received hundreds of calls, but most of the calls were fruitless. However, one clue provided a promising lead. A woman reported her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, including aggressive outbursts and a disturbing threat he made during an argument. The police investigated the man and discovered that he knew Shannon's brother, which meant Kirsten might have known him too. Additionally, the man had a history of drug use and assault, and he had previously been familiar with the Hatfield family home. Despite this, the investigation ultimately found that the man had a solid alibi for the time Kirsten went missing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he was at a bar until around 4 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, making it impossible for him to have abducted Kirsten. Detectives pursued multiple leads, but each one led to a dead end. As time passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive began to fade. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, refused to give up. She took matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media outlets, distributed flyers, and even investigated potential suspects on her own. However, Shannon faced numerous obstacles. Many local businesses refused to display Kirsten's flyers, citing company policies. She also attempted to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon established a volunteer center to help find Kirsten. The center focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon encountered new challenges. Some volunteers stole money, lied about their work, and used the media to gain attention for themselves. Despite these setbacks, Shannon persevered in her search for the truth. After years of effort, Shannon realized that her approach was not yielding results. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon's goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect others from potentially dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. Shannon suspected Kirsten's kidnapper had a history of violent crimes. To pursue this lead, she researched people with violent pasts in her area but found no connection to Kirsten's disappearance. Despite her efforts, she eventually had to accept that Kirsten might have passed away and might not return. Still, Shannon continued to search for answers. Periodically, police reopened the case to investigate new leads, working with the FBI to create an updated sketch of Kirsten's possible appearance. In 2014, there was a breakthrough in the Kirsten case. A woman contacted the police and shared a shocking discovery she had made while sorting through her late mother's belongings. Among her mother's possessions was a diary detailing the woman's father's confession, claiming he had killed Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was extremely detailed, and detectives were convinced of its accuracy. According to the diary, the man had kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a house he owned in a nearby town, and murdered her after horribly torturing her. The description of the crime process spanned many pages, leaving even veteran investigators confused. The diary also revealed that the crime had been recorded on a videotape. Investigators immediately questioned the woman's father. However, his reaction was surprising. While he denied any involvement in the Kirsten case, he asserted that he had known who was responsible for Kirsten's death, saying the murder had occurred at his ex-girlfriend's house. The police were confused and asked for the house address. They quickly received a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly search this house. The forensic investigation began with a crucial step: the use of luminol, a substance that glows when exposed to very small amounts of blood. When the forensic team applied luminol to the scene, they were surprised by the results. An expert later described the house as lit up like a Christmas tree due to the numerous bloodstains. The bloodstains matched the details of the murder described in the diary, leading the team to believe they had finally found concrete evidence. To investigate further, police removed the floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent these items to a laboratory for analysis. They also organized an excavation team in the hope of finding the victim's body. In addition, the police also discovered a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, so they had to review the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might have contained footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, but after hours of analysis, none of the tapes were related to the murder. Excavations also proved fruitless, with no remains or evidence found in the soil. However, just when the investigation seemed to have been gaining momentum, the police encountered an unexpected and shocking episode. Experts who analyzed the bloodstains in the house concluded that the bloodstains had actually belonged to an animal, not a human. This revelation left the police stunned and wondering what had just happened. Had someone deliberately deceived them with a cruel joke? Or was the person writing the diary struggling with mental health issues and convinced by a false narrative that had developed in their mind? The truth was still unknown. Detectives had run out of leads in Kirsten's case, and the case was once again stalled. In an effort to revive the investigation, the case was reassigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller in the summer of 2015. Miller decided to start from scratch and review all existing documents and records. During his scrutiny, Miller discovered something surprising. His predecessors had overlooked some key evidence, including blood found on Kirsten's windowsill and on her underwear. The evidence had been stored in a warehouse, but shockingly had never been sent to a laboratory for analysis. Miller suspected that the reason for this might have been because police initially thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, which would not have yielded any useful results. However, Miller decided to send them to the laboratory for analysis. The results were surprising. The blood sample did not belong to Kirsten, but to an unidentified man. This was a significant breakthrough after many years of investigation. Miller decided to collect DNA samples from all the men who had participated in the investigation since the kidnapping. Police tracked down each person on the list and sent their DNA to a lab for analysis. Everyone was cooperative and provided their DNA samples quickly. Miller patiently waited for the results, and finally he received a call from the lab. Experts had analyzed one of the samples and found a perfect match with bloodstains found on the window and the victim's underwear. The DNA belonged to Anthony Palma, 56. The Hatfield family's neighbor who lived across the street. Anthony had been one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. At the time, he claimed to have woken up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now that his DNA had been linked to the crime scene, detectives decided to bring him in for further questioning. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient for a conviction, the investigators hoped to obtain a confession from Anthony. A confession would expedite the trial and potentially lead them to Kirsten's body, which was still missing. To get Anthony to talk, the detectives invited him for questioning, telling him it was a routine process. They claimed they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, to gather new information. In reality, their goal was to get Anthony to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Detectives asked Anthony to recall any additional details about the night in question. He retold the same story he had shared 18 years earlier. But this time he added a new detail. He claimed to have seen a white car parked outside Kirsten's house, although he didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked Anthony about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. He stated that he knew them as neighbors, but he had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He maintained that he got along well with the other neighborhood children, who would often ask him for help fixing their bikes or visit him for candy. This conversation became a critical point in the investigation, as the police had discovered Anthony's blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's bedroom. When they asked if he had ever entered the house, Anthony claimed he had not. This statement raised suspicions, as the presence of his blood suggested otherwise. The detectives faced a challenge. Anthony's blood was fresh, suggesting it had been left recently, but he had had a visit to the house when it belonged to a friend. The investigators decided to move forward with the interrogation. informing Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony repeatedly denied ever entering the house, despite the evidence to the contrary. The investigators attempted to extract a confession, but he consistently maintained his innocence. The detectives changed their approach and exited the room, leaving Detective Miller to speak with Anthony privately. Miller entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it in front of Anthony. However, Anthony promptly pushed the photo away, refusing to look at it for the remainder of the conversation. Miller asked various questions, attempting to prompt Anthony into a confession, but he continued to deny any involvement. Failing to obtain an admission of guilt, the police ended the interrogation and apprehended Anthony. A subsequent search of his residence, made possible by a search warrant, uncovered no evidence of Kirsten's remains or any other relevant evidence. During the trial, Anthony repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime. But DNA evidence told a different story. As the trial progressed, new details emerged that the police had initially overlooked. It was revealed that Anthony had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior conviction for breaking into a girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a violent attack involving a weapon. Anthony's past convictions signaled his dangerousness, yet were overlooked in 1997. In 2017, a jury returned a guilty verdict for Kirsten's kidnapping and Kirsten's murder, and Anthony was sentenced to life in prison. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony never disclosed the location of Kirsten's body. Kirsten's mother refused to give up hope, however. She consistently reached out to Anthony, calling and visiting him in prison, in an effort to find out where Kirsten's body was. She spent hours trying to extract the truth from him, but ultimately, she was unsuccessful. Tragically, in 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who was motivated by a desire for revenge for Anthony's horrific crime against a child. As a result, Kirsten's family's only hope of finding Kirsten's body now depends on hikers or tourists who might stumble upon it in remote national parks, where Anthony may have buried her. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tanya McKinley. Tanya McKinley was born on January 25, 1961, in the small town of Milton, Florida. She grew up in a loving family and was very close to her older sister. After graduating from high school, Tanya decided to move to Pensacola, a town about 25 miles away from her hometown. She pursued a career in the medical field. Tanya moved to a new city with her cousin Vanita, and they shared an apartment. After moving in, Tanya met a man named James, and they began dating. They eventually moved in together and had a son, Timothy, in 1983. Although Tanya was happy to be a mother, her relationship with James was troubled. They argued frequently, and about a year after their son was born, they decided to go their separate ways. By the end of 1984, Tanya was temporarily living with Vanita, who was now married with 2 children. Tanya planned to find her own place as soon as possible. On New Year's Eve, Tanya, Vanita, and her husband decided to celebrate at a local bar. They left their children at a late-night daycare. Around midnight, Vanita and her husband were getting ready to leave, but Tanya wanted to stay a little longer. Since the daycare closed at 1 a.m., Vanita agreed to pick up Tanya's son, allowing Tanya to stay at the bar. Before leaving, Vanita asked Tanya how she planned to get home, since they had driven there together. Tanya replied that she would get a ride from their acquaintance at the bar. However, when Vanita woke up on January 1st, she found that Tanya had not yet returned home. At first, Vanita thought Tanya might have slept over with a friend, so she was not too worried. Then, Vanita's mother-in-law arrived with heartbreaking news. Tanya had been found dead around 3 a.m. A Pensacola resident was on her way to the vet with her daughter. While driving, her daughter pointed out a person on the side of the road. Pensacola thought it might be a mannequin, but when she got out to check, she discovered it was a human body. Pensacola immediately returned home and called the police. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the body of a woman lying in an empty lot beside the road. She had no shoes, her tights were down, and her dress was pulled up. Near the body, a blue towel with what appeared to be bloodstains was found. The police identified the victim as 23-year-old Tanya McKinley. Further investigation led them to discover her shoes and purse nearby, containing identification with her name on it. The body was turned over to medical experts for further examination. Meanwhile, police continued to process the crime scene. They soon discovered that Tanya likely did not die where she was found. There was no significant blood near the body, except for a stain on a towel, and signs on the ground suggested that the body had been dragged to the side of the road. On the towel and Tanya's body, investigators found several clues, including dog hair and a human hair. They suspected that the hair belonged to the killer, and that the killer may have owned a dog. Medical experts determined that the Tanya had suffered a head injury from a heavy object, but her cause of death was actually strangulation. They also confirmed that the Tanya had been sexually assaulted. A semen sample was collected from her body, but at the time, DNA analysis was not yet widely used in forensic science. However, the experts were able to establish that the suspect had type B blood. Police began to develop a list of potential suspects. Police turned their attention to Tanya's ex-husband, James. After talking to Tanya's family and friends, police discovered that James and Tanya had argued frequently before and after the birth of their son. When Tanya decided to end the relationship, James was unhappy and tried to convince her to stay. Police believe that James followed Tanya to the bar on New Year's Eve, leading to a confrontation that ended in murder. They brought James in for questioning, but he denied any involvement in the crime. He also agreed to provide hair samples for comparison. Although experts were unable to extract DNA from the samples, they were able to compare the hairs under a microscope. The results showed that James' hair was significantly different from the hair found on Tanya's body and the towel. As a result, the police temporarily ruled him out as a suspect. Police focused on everyone who was at the bar on New Year's Eve. They asked Vanita if she had noticed anyone acting strangely or aggressively toward Tanya, but she said the evening had gone off without incident. Police also discovered that after Tanya split from her ex-husband, she had started dating a man named Kurt, who was a bartender at the bar where she spent New Year's Eve. Kurt was working the night of the murder. When questioned, Kurt denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he had gone to a New Year's party with friends after his shift. The police reviewed all the testimony and concluded that Kurt had enough time to commit the crime. Based on numerous interviews with people at the bar, the police determined that Tanya was last seen alive at 1:15 a.m., but no one saw her leave. The police also spoke with local residents where the body was discovered. A family reported driving past the scene at around 2 a.m. and were certain that there was no body at that time. This meant that Tanya was killed about 1.5 hours after she was last seen alive. During this time, Kurt was unable to provide an alibi. He volunteered to take a lie detector test, but the results were inconclusive, and further investigation revealed that Kurt's blood type did not match the killer's blood type, as determined by a semen sample. As a result, Kurt was cleared of the crime. Unable to analyze DNA from the killer's semen, and with no witnesses or concrete evidence, police could only assume that the perpetrator likely lived in the area where the body was discovered. The case had been closed for years due to lack of concrete evidence. Timothy, who was only 18 months old when his mother died, was raised by his father and Tanya's family. Together, they kept the truth about his mother's death a secret. When Timothy was 14 years old, he was informed that his mother had died in a car accident. As Christmas approached that year, out of curiosity, he searched his father's closet for his present, and Timothy stumbled upon a shocking letter addressed to television host Montel Williams, written by his father himself. In a letter, Timothy's father wrote asking for help in solving the murder of Timothy's mother, Tanya. The letter included a detailed account of the crime, which was the first time Timothy learned of his mother's tragic fate. Years later, in the early 2000s, police reopened Tanya's case, hoping that advances in DNA technology might help identify the killer. Police sent all available evidence to a lab for analysis. Experts discovered that the blood on a blue towel near Tanya's body came from a man, not Tanya. They created a DNA profile of the unidentified man and uploaded it to the FBI database. But there were no matches. The case was put on hold until 2015, when it was reopened, 30 years after the murder. Through investigation, the police discovered from the FBI's archived database that a person had some similarities with the DNA found at Tanya's crime scene. However, the match was not strong. To investigate further, the police learned about the person's family background and even contacted his relatives for assistance. These relatives cooperated and provided DNA samples for comparison. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis showed that his family was not involved in Tanya's death, leaving the police with no new leads. In 2018, a journalist named Tony Adam became interested in Tanya's case. Tony contacted the police offering help, and the police became suspicious of his involvement. Tony joined the investigation despite having no background in criminal investigations. The police, who had made little progress in the case, hoped that Tony's involvement wouldn't hinder the investigation. In 2019, a year after Tony got involved, police decided to identify the killer's relatives. This time, they enlisted the help of Bardstown, a genetic genealogy company, and expanded the search to include primarily the DNA of known criminals. Bardstown expanded its search to public genetic databases, which were much larger in scope. Unlike DNA evidence collected from a crime scene, these databases contain DNA samples that people have voluntarily uploaded to find relatives. To find the killer, experts used a process of elimination, carefully analyzing the family trees of potential relatives to identify someone who matched their suspect's criteria. They were looking for a man who was at least old enough to have committed the crime in 1985 and had a connection to the area where the crime was committed. In 2020, police identified a suspect in Tanya's murder. Daniel Wells, 57, had been arrested in the late 1980s for assault and indecent exposure. At the time, he was living in Pensacola, working as a carpenter and living with his wife and children. But to confirm whether Daniel was actually the killer, detectives needed to compare his DNA to the profile they collected from the crime scene. To prevent Daniel from fleeing, the police approached cautiously. They kept watch, waiting for an opportunity to collect a DNA sample from him without arousing Daniel's suspicion. Daniel threw a cigarette butt out of the car window near his workplace. The police collected the cigarette butt and immediately sent it to the lab for analysis. Experts extracted DNA from the saliva on the filter and compared it to the DNA of the killer in the Tanya case. The results were a match. The police eventually identified Daniel as the culprit and arrested him the same day. Despite the DNA test results, the police still tried to get Daniel to confess. They arranged for a patrol officer to stop Daniel's car under the pretext of doing a routine ID check. Detectives then approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to accompany them to the station without providing any further explanation. By withholding information, they intentionally kept Daniel in suspense, allowing them to proceed with the investigation cautiously. The police approached Daniel, informing him that he needed to come with them to the police station without further explanation. During the investigation, the detectives slowly steered the conversation toward Tanya's murder, asking Daniel about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. At first, he claimed to have never seen Tanya. However, when the detectives revealed that his DNA was found at the crime scene, his story began to unfold. As the questioning continued, Daniel's denials became increasingly unconvincing, and he grew more and more agitated. Detectives made it clear that the DNA evidence was irrefutable and that he would face consequences for his actions. As the interrogation continued, Daniel denied his guilt and became increasingly agitated. The police said the DNA evidence was incontrovertible and he would face the consequences for his actions. Faced with the evidence, Daniel finally broke down and began to speak. He and Tanya went to his house, where they had sex after drinking. However, an argument broke out, the argument escalated, and in a fit of rage, Daniel picked up a heavy wooden cutting board and hit Tanya over the head. When he realized she was dead, Daniel panicked and dumped her body in a location where it was later discovered. On his way back, Daniel discarded Tanya's belongings and returned home. When questioned about the dog hairs found on Tanya's clothes and towel, he attributed them to his roommate's black Labrador. Contrary to Daniel's claim that Tanya died from a head injury, the medical evidence clearly showed that the cause of death was strangulation. In a possible chain of events, Daniel struck Tanya in the head, but when he realized she was still alive, he resorted to strangling her. The police gathered enough evidence to arrest him for murder. Police then contacted Tanya's family, including her son Timothy, to inform them of the developments in the case. Timothy was deeply moved, thanking the police for finally identifying his mother's killer. 2 weeks after his arrest, Daniel's body was found in his cell. An investigation confirmed that he had committed suicide. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case, the case of Doreen Herbert. Doreen Herbert was born on November 29, 1952, in California. She grew up in a very large family of 5 children. Her kindness and desire to help others defined her as a person. After college, she moved to San Francisco, where she worked as a physiotherapist. Doreen also nurtured a dream of creating her own large family. This aspiration became a reality when she met Michael Dennis, who worked near her clinic. They began dating, got married, and in 1976, their son Paul was born. Initially, Michael and Doreen were happy, but the birth of their child marked the beginning of their marital troubles. A year later, they decided to go their separate ways, with their son staying with Doreen and Michael receiving regular visitation rights. Doreen and her family were still able to maintain a fairly stable life despite the many hardships they faced. She met Charles, and they started dating, eventually getting married and settling in a quiet neighborhood in San Jose. They was thrilled when their daughter Diana was born in 1979. Charles was eager to be a father and was delighted to welcome Diana, raising her alongside Doreen's son from a previous relationship. Tragedy struck in February 1980 when disaster befell their young family. 4-year-old Paul slipped through the fence surrounding their backyard pool and fell into the water. Doreen, who was at home at the time, discovered what had happened too late. She immediately pulled Paul from the water and called for emergency services. Paul was rushed to the hospital and connected to life support, but after 10 agonizing days, the medical team concluded that he had no chance of recovery. The heartbreaking decision was made to disconnect Paul from life support. Doreen was heartbroken and consumed by guilt, despite the police investigation clearing her of any blame. However, with the help of her young daughter, she slowly began to heal. For years after the traumatic event, the family finally received some good news. After 2 previous miscarriages, Doreen became pregnant again, and this time, everything seemed to be going smoothly. They was expecting a baby boy, due to arrive in early November. Just days before Doreen's scheduled hospital visit, the family decided to participate in Halloween festivities. On the evening of October 31st, the neighborhood was filled with decorated homes, children trick-or-treating, and parents handing out candy. Diana, now 4 years old, was excited to join in and her parents agreed. Although Doreen was 9 months pregnant, she accompanied her daughter on the trick-or-treating adventure, while Charles stayed home to hand out candy to other children. Charles and his wife, Doreen, had returned home from taking their daughter trick-or-treating. Just before 9 p.m., noticing they were running low on candy, Charles decided to make a quick trip to the nearby store to restock. At around 8:50 p.m., he left the house, leaving his wife and daughter behind. 15 minutes later, he returned home to find the front door slightly ajar, which seemed suspicious. As he entered the house, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife, Doreen, lay on the floor in the corridor, surrounded by a large amount of blood and showed no signs of life. Charles immediately called 911. In the living room, he then found the body of their unborn child. Charles was in shock, struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. At first, he wondered if Doreen had had a miscarriage, but he quickly realized that something much more serious had happened. Next to their unborn child lay Doreen's best severed hand, making it clear to Charles that his family had been attacked. Fearing for his daughter's safety, he frantically searched for her. There was so much blood on the floor that he slipped and fell while running through the house. Eventually, he found his daughter hiding behind the sofa in the living room. She is still alive and unhurt. When paramedics arrived, they found Doreen's weak pulse and rushed her to the hospital. Tragically, Doreen did not survive and was pronounced dead in the ambulance. Her unborn child also did not survive. The attacker had inflicted severe injuries on the baby after removing it from Doreen's womb. A post-mortem examination revealed that Doreen had been stabbed multiple times with a long, sharp object, possibly a sword or machete. The crime scene was particularly disturbing, with blood covering the floors, walls, and ceiling. Police officers at the scene were deeply affected by what they witnessed. Despite a thorough search of the house, no signs of the perpetrator or any evidence were found. However, investigators did discover bloody footprints leading from the house to the middle of the road, suggesting that the killer may have escaped in a vehicle. Soon, investigators found another crucial piece of evidence on the lawn in front of the house, a wolf mask covered in blood. They believed it might belong to the killer, as Charles reported they didn't own such a mask. The evidence was sent to the laboratory for analysis, and police attempted to question Diana, who was the only witness in this incident. Although shaken and in complete shock, Diana provided valuable details about what happened. She explained that shortly after her father left for the store, someone knocked on their door. When Doreen answered, she saw a man wearing a wolf mask and holding a long blade. He threatened to kill her, and Doreen immediately screamed at Diana to run out of the house. Diana hid behind the sofa but couldn't recall what happened next until her father found her. Initially, the police found it suspicious that the victim's husband, Charles, had left for the store just minutes before the killer arrived. This coincidence led investigators to consider him as a potential suspect. When Charles returned home, he unknowingly stepped on blood multiple times, even falling and getting covered in it. Despite this, Diana was unable to help identify the attacker due to the wolf mask. Police initially considered the possibility that Charles might have intentionally gotten blood on his clothes to create an alibi. However, detectives quickly discovered several inconsistencies in this theory. Firstly, Charles's shoes did not match the bloody footprints found on the street. Secondly, the killer likely escaped in a car parked in front of the house, but no blood was found in Charles's vehicle, nor was a different pair of shoes discovered. To investigate further, police went to the store that Charles had visited that evening and spoke to the staff there. They confirmed that Charles had indeed purchased candy from him. This established an alibi for Charles, as he didn't have enough time to commit the murder. Surveillance footage from the store supported Charles's account, leading detectives to temporarily rule him out as the prime suspect. They then asked Charles if he knew of anyone who might want to harm his family. Charles immediately pointed out Michael, Doreen's ex-husband. According to Charles, Michael's behavior changed dramatically after the death of their son, who had drowned in the pool. Michael blamed Doreen for the boy's death, believing she had deliberately killed Paul to cut ties with him. Michael filed a lawsuit against his ex-wife Doreen, holding her responsible for the death of Paul, but lost the case. Their marriage had been troubled even before their divorce. After the birth of their son, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic, often withdrawing into depression and distancing himself from his family. Doreen suspected that Michael's childhood traumas were to blame. As a child, Michael had hearing problems and wore a bulky hearing aid, which earned him constant teasing from his peers. This led to him growing up as an introvert with few friends and a fear of interacting with women. Although his relationship with Doreen seemed to have helped him overcome these issues, they eventually resurfaced and contributed to their decision to divorce. When Doreen married Charles, Michael began to resent her, particularly for the fact that another man was raising his son. These feelings became even worse after Paul's death, made Michael hate his ex-wife even more. Michael has also been unemployed for a long time, which had a significant impact on him. After considering this information, the detectives decided to visit Michael's house to speak with him. Although Charles's statement alone was not enough to make Michael the main suspect, the fact that Michael lived only 2 miles from Doreen's house prompted the detectives to pay him a visit immediately. The officers arrived at Michael's home around midnight and noticed a pickup truck parked near the garage. When police shined their flashlights on Michael's car, they saw blood on the steering wheel and keys. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. Lights were still on inside the house and they could hear running water, leading them to suspect that Michael might be destroying evidence or washing bloody clothes. They continued knocking until Michael opened the door. Michael remained calm, even after being informed Doreen's murder. Michael answered the officers' questions calmly and allowed them to enter his house without a warrant. He claimed that he had gone to the store earlier that day, returned home, and hadn't left since. He even agreed to sign a form allowing the police to search his home. However, as he reached for the pen to sign, officers noticed a deep cut on his right hand. Michael explained that he had accidentally cut himself while carving a pumpkin for Halloween, but the police were skeptical of his story. The wound was fresh, with blood still seeping out. As officers searched the house, Michael accompanied one of them upstairs to retrieve his ID. However, when Michael reached for the bed headboard, the officer intervened, sensing suspicious behavior. Why would Michael store his documents behind the bed? Curiosity led the police to conduct a deeper investigation. Upon approaching the bed, they spotted a holster attached to the headboard, containing a loaded gun. The officer confiscated the weapon and escorted Michael downstairs to the other officers. Meanwhile, the officers discovered a trail of blood droplets leading from the house to the garage. And they found a washing machine and a pile of clothes with bloodstains. This evidence is enough to arrest Michael. A thorough search of the house by detectives and forensic experts followed, seeking evidence that might link Michael to the murder. Although the blood analysis would take a few days, the police made some disturbing discoveries. They found an empty box for an 18-inch machete. Medical experts confirmed that the wounds from this knife matched the actual wounds found on Doreen's body. During the investigation, police found 2 makeshift coffins in Michael's house, leading them to believe that he was planning to harm his ex-wife, Doreen, and her husband. The presence of medical body bags at his home was also suspicious. As detectives pieced together the evidence, they went to a judge to request a warrant for Michael's arrest. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence, they were initially only able to hold him for a limited time. When the judge refused to issue an arrest warrant, citing insufficient circumstantial evidence to convict Michael, he was released from prison. but detectives eventually got vital information from the autopsy results. Experts discovered that the crime scene had blood from two individuals. One blood type was identified as Doreen's, and the other was Michael's. This evidence suggested that Michael had likely injured himself while attacking Doreen. With this new evidence, the judge quickly issued a warrant for Michael's arrest, charged him with the murder of Doreen and her unborn child. In addition, detectives discovered that Michael owned a wolf mask identical to the one found near Doreen's house the previous Halloween. Further inquiry revealed that Michael had worn the mask to a party, and a photograph of him wearing it was even obtained by police. To validate this, detectives searched Michael's home and found the same clothing he wore in the photo. To search for new clues to the case, the police interviewed Doreen's neighbors about the incidents that happened that night. Several children who were trick-or-treating reported seeing a man wearing a wolf mask standing across from Doreen's house, eyeing it intensely. This sighting occurred around 7 p.m., a full 2 hours before the murder. Michael's trial commenced in July 1988, 4 years after the crime. He initially pleaded guilty but later changed his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. A psychologist evaluated Michael and diagnosed him with severe mental health issues. Michael claimed that the horror of Halloween was too much to bear, as the sight of children trick-or-treating reminded him of his own loss and triggered a mental breakdown. He alleged that this breakdown led him to visit Doreen's house armed with a machete on the evening of the murder. When Doreen opened the door, Michael revealed his true identity as the man behind the mask and made a shocking statement: she killed their son. Recognizing the man as Michael, Doreen quickly screamed for her daughter to run and Michael immediately attacked her. Michael claimed he was unaware that Doreen was pregnant at the time of the attack, but this assertion was met with skepticism. Doreen was visibly pregnant, standing at 4 feet 1 inches tall, and her friends found it hard to believe that Michael wouldn't have noticed, especially given her prominent belly. In fact, her friends joked that her pregnancy had made her almost as wide as she was tall. The prosecution argued that Michael was fully aware of his actions and had planned the crime in advance, a claim supported by evidence from the investigation. Detectives discovered that Michael had previously shared his desire to kill his ex-wife and her husband with friends, and had even discussed disposing of their bodies in the bay. The presence of 2 coffins and body bags in his home suggested that he was serious about carrying out this plan, and the prosecution argued that he had adjusted his intentions for some reason to target Doreen instead. Michael may have panicked or feared being caught, prompting him to leave the house quickly. During the trial, Doreen's 9-year-old daughter, Diana, testified about what she witnessed. Charles had wanted to spare his daughter the traumatic experience, but she was the only witness to the crime. The trial lasted a year, ultimately resulting in Michael's conviction for the murders of Doreen and her unborn child. Michael was sentenced to death, but a moratorium on the death penalty in California delayed his execution. As a result, Michael remains in prison, and his sentence will be carried out. Years later, Diana revealed that the murder had such a profound effect on her, and she could never forget the horror she witnessed. Ultimately, Diana decides to forgive Michael and try to move past the past to focus on the future. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Parente family. William Michael Parente was born on July 20, 1949, in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. His parents, Willie and Rulon Parente, raised him with values rooted in their family's history of law enforcement. His father, a New York trooper, played a significant role in shaping his upbringing. As an only child, William received his parents' undivided attention. He spent summers enjoying the sun with his family in Long Beach. William pursued his education at Brooklyn College and Brooklyn Law School, thanks in part to the financial support of his uncle, Anthony J. Russo. William worked in his uncle's Manhattan law office on the Avenue of the Americas. There, he built a reputation as a thoughtful lawyer and dedication to his family. William was known for his demeanor, courteous, which extended to everyone. He worked diligently for long hours, but made sure not to overwork himself. Unlike many of his peers, he refrained from using profanity or engaging in post-work gatherings for drinks. His disciplined lifestyle and commitment to kindness set him apart in the legal community. Even on difficult days, William maintained his composure and treated everyone with respect. In 1977, after being admitted to the New York bar, William married Betty Mazzarella. He began his career at a prestigious Wall Street law firm but made a significant change in 1988. When Betty became pregnant with their first child, William decided to start his own private practice. This change happened around the same time the family moved to Garden City, New York, an affluent community in Nassau County, Long Island. Despite living in the suburbs, the William family remained connected to their Brooklyn roots. They regularly returned to their old neighborhood to enjoy local delicacies, reconnect with old friends, visit their mother, and relive cherished childhood memories. By the time he was 60, William Parente had become an experienced estate and tax attorney. He ran his practice from an office in a Queens shopping center. His wife, Betty Mazzarella, 58, dedicated her time to taking care of their home and organizing charity fundraisers in their local community. Betty was actively involved in church activities, which were an integral part of their neighborhood's social fabric. The couple had two daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. Stephanie, the elder daughter, was 19 years old and a sophomore at Loyola College, studying speech pathology with plans to pursue dentistry in the future. Her friendly nature made her well-liked by her classmates and teachers. She also maintained close relationships with her friends back home in Garden City. Their younger daughter, Catherine, showed remarkable talent at just 11 years old, earning her admiration from teachers and staff at Garden City Middle School. Her exceptional abilities indicated a promising future ahead. In the later stages of his legal career, William became involved in what he called bridge loans. He acted as a financial intermediary, similar to a bank, allegedly using assets from investment portfolios under his management to finance these loans. When an investor asked for their money back, William Parente was unable to return the funds or explain why he couldn't. On April 15, 2009, William, along with his wife Betty and youngest daughter Catherine, took a trip to visit their eldest daughter Stephanie in Towson, planning to surprise her. They booked room 1029 at the Sharon Hotel, near the Talone Town Center Mall, with a reservation until the 19th. When they arrived, Stephanie's friend was surprised, given that classes had just resumed after the Easter break and Stephanie was busy preparing for a chemistry exam. The visit was unexpected, especially since the parents had already planned to visit on Friday the 17th to discuss Stephanie's study abroad plans in England. Despite the initial surprise, the visit seemed like a normal family reunion. However, what took place that day remains unclear. Based on the evidence, here is what happened. Betty Mazzarella Parente was the first victim. She was brutally assaulted and suffocated in bed on Sunday morning. Later, Catherine, the youngest daughter, met a similar fate, dying from the same violence as her mother. Catherine's body was placed beside her mother's. On Sunday afternoon, Stephanie arrived at the hotel after leaving her campus and tragically met the same demise as her mother and younger sister. Her body was laid beside theirs on the bed. None of the victims showed signs of struggle. No evidence of drugging or physical restraint was found. William Parente carefully planned the annihilation of his family. On that somber Sunday, around midnight, one of Stephanie's close friends and roommates grew worried about her absence from their dorm room. After hours of worrying, the roommate called the hotel room phone to reach Stephanie. The roommate knew Stephanie planned to return to the dorm to study for final exams, so they were surprised when William Parente, Stephanie's father, answered the call. William explained that Stephanie was staying at the hotel with family. The roommate accepted this excuse and ended the call, unaware that Stephanie was already dead. Later, the roommate thought back on the conversation and remembered that William's tone seemed unusual. On Monday morning, William Parente ended his life by using a knife he had bought at a nearby mall. He inflicted fatal injuries on himself in the hotel bathroom. When the family failed to check out, hotel staff became concerned. School Loyola College also raised concerns about Stephanie's unexplained absence from classes, especially since it was a crucial time for her final exams. The college contacted the hotel, requesting a welfare check on Stephanie and her family. At 3 p.m., a housekeeper tried to enter their 10th floor room but found the door locked and received no response. The housekeeper alerted other staff, and a hotel manager entered the room. The manager found William Parente's lifeless body in the bathroom, having taken his own life with a knife. The manager quickly called emergency services and continued to investigate. As he entered the room further, he found 3 bodies carefully arranged on one of the beds. The victims were Betty Mazzarella and her 2 daughters, Stephanie and Catherine. The Baltimore County Police were immediately called to the scene, and all other guests on the 10th floor were relocated as part of the investigation. The police also took the family's Mercedes-Benz SUV from the hotel parking lot. After investigating, they determined that William Parente had committed a murder-suicide on that Sunday. And the police found that the causes of death were asphyxiation and blunt force trauma. They believe that Betty and Catherine were the first victims, followed by Stephanie. The police think that one of William's last interactions was with Stephanie's boyfriend, who tried to call Stephanie around midnight. However, Stephanie had already been killed by her father by then. Shortly after the call, William likely went to the bathroom and took his own life using a knife he had bought earlier from the mall. It is believed that William Parente's decision to kill his family and then commit suicide may have stemmed from an investigation into his possible involvement in a major fraud. William Parente was accused of being part of a Ponzi scheme, a type of investment scam where money from new investors is used to pay existing ones, often resulting in huge financial losses. Investors have been scammed of around $20 million, with one investor claiming a loss of $450,000. Investigations showed that William had issued bounced checks totaling $245,000 to investors, leading to further complaints to the New York Attorney General's office. After William Parente's death, some investors came forward with losses totaling millions of dollars. A colleague of William's made a poignant observation: financial losses can be recovered, but the loss of human life is irreparable. Friends and family have struggled to overcome their feelings of grief following the horrific incident. A memorial service was held at Loyola College on Monday night to honor Stephanie's memory. The family William Parente home, once full of life, became a somber space filled with tributes such as flowers and candlelit vigils. A funeral service was held at St. Joseph's Church in Garden City to commemorate Betty and her daughters. According to reports, Catherine's middle school classmates were transported by bus to attend the service. Stephanie's college peers made a significant effort to join, driving from Talon and arriving as early as 4 a.m. for the morning ceremony. The family was laid to rest together at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York. In contrast, William Parente received a separate, private funeral service at a different location. He was cremated, but the location of his ashes was not publicly disclosed. The horrific actions of this merciless perpetrator have caused immense distress for the victims and their loved ones. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Foster family. Christopher Foster had always been considered a success. His mother, Enid, described him as someone who actively pursued financial opportunities from an early age. Along with his younger brother, Andrew, he aspired to follow in the footsteps of their late father, who had been a sales manager. Although they both aimed to become successful businessmen, Chris and Andrew had had a tense relationship since they were children. Andrew later explained that Chris's confidence and assertiveness had overshadowed Andrew's quiet nature. Despite this, both brothers were very close to their mother, Enid. In 1987, Chris married Jill, a housewife, and they had their daughter Kirsty in 1993. Chris's path to wealth began in the late 80s when he worked as a mattress salesman and used inexpensive pizza boxes for insulation. His life changed dramatically after he founded a successful engineering company. This business made Chris a self-made millionaire through the development of an innovative insulation material that became essential in the oil industry. The Piper Alpha oil rig explosion on July 6, 1988, had led to a catastrophic fire that lasted for days and claimed the lives of 167 people. After watching the news, Chris saw an opportunity in this tragedy and identified a market niche for fireproof insulation specifically for oil and gas rigs. Although many oil companies showed interest, they wanted certification of the product's effectiveness before signing a contract. To prove its value, Chris took the financial risk of mortgaging his house to fund an experiment. The test was successful. His product, Overshield, showed exceptional resilience compared to other insulation materials when exposed to fire. It even received a rare A1 fire test rating. Major oil companies quickly placed orders, making Christopher Foster a millionaire almost overnight. Reports suggested that he earned so much money that he didn't know how to spend it all. As his business grew, Christopher's annual turnover increased significantly from £50,000 to £1 million. By 2004, Chris's net worth had been reported to be £10 million. That same year, his wife Jill noticed a house in Shropshire Life magazine. It was Bardstown House, a beautiful mansion in Maesbrook, a wealthy village in Shropshire, England. The estate was 16 acres in size, had its own lake and equestrian grounds. Despite being offered at around £1.5 million, the house still needed repairs. Jill was so intrigued that Chris made an offer the next morning. Foster's family quickly sold their house and moved to Bardstown House. Chris then invested a further £50,000 to install a swimming pool and landscape the property. After settling down, Chris led a lavish lifestyle. He bought 2 Porsches, one for himself and one for Jill, a James Bond-style Aston Martin, Range Rovers, and many other vehicles. Their daughter Kirsty attended a private boarding school and Chris also bought her several horses. Kirsty spent time with her horses when not at school and participated in equestrian competitions. Friends described her as quiet, thoughtful, and kind. In addition, Chris also bought 4 dogs and several pigeons. He further enhanced their lives by hiring a butler and a personal assistant, and the house had antique furniture worth more than £200,000. Chris's most expensive hobby was his passion for shooting, demonstrated by his expensive gun collection, each costing between £12,000 and £12,500, equivalent to nearly $20,000 at the time. Chris often attended shooting parties that could last 3 days, with bills running up to £8,000. He had a habit of leaving guns around the house. Occasionally, when pigeons made a mess of Chris's car, he would shoot them, much to Jill's frustration. In one disturbing incident, when Kirsty's black Labrador began disturbing the sheep, Chris was unable to control the dog and led it down a country road to shoot it in the head. Chris was a successful businessman but lacked a long-term vision. Notoriously impulsive, he craved instant gratification and was quick to cut ties with people who annoyed him. Chris enjoyed being admired and envied by others for his wealth, and social status was very important to him. Over time, both Chris and Jill moved up the social ladder, and it became clear to those close to Chris that he wanted to move away from his roots in Wolverhampton. Jill enjoyed shopping sprees and spent her days doing self-care activities like nail and hair appointments, along with beauty treatments like manicures and Botox injections. Chris and his family regularly went on luxury vacations, staying in luxury hotels and enjoying the best food. These lavish trips could sometimes cost up to £20,000 each, and Chris didn't hesitate to pay. However, unbeknownst to his friends and family, Chris had reached his financial limit and began withdrawing money from his business. His excessive spending had led to financial imbalance, with more money going out than coming in. In 2003, Chris had signed an exclusive contract with DRC, giving them the exclusive rights to produce his oil rig sealant. By 2004, his net worth had been reported to be £1 million. However, by 2005, he owed £2.8 million. Instead of cutting costs, Chris, due to his lavish spending habits, sought more money from other sources. Despite the exclusive agreement with DRC, he signed another contract with another company to sell his products. DRC discovered this infringement and sued Chris, resulting in a lawsuit and DRC acquiring Chris's patent. Chris went bankrupt, and in 2007, his company was dissolved. His assets worth £3 million were frozen and his salary was gone. Despite serious financial troubles, Chris continued to act as if nothing significant had happened. At the same time, Chris became involved in a dispute with his accountant, who reported him to the Inland Revenue for tax evasion. Chris had failed to pay VAT, national insurance, and various other taxes. To deal with his increasing tax obligations, he had to borrow from banks to ease his financial strain. In addition, he had mortgaged the Bardstown house 3 times and withdrawn money from more than 20 different bank accounts. Despite his lavish lifestyle and constant spending, Chris still tried to hide the fact that he was deeply in debt. Chris gradually found himself struggling with overwhelming challenges, aware that time was ticking away and fearful of losing everything. However, during a conversation with a friend about houses, Chris insisted that he would never sell us Bardstown house. Struggling with the pressure to maintain his flashy and knowing that his time and money were running out, Chris repeatedly sought professional help. He confided in the doctor, revealing his feelings of depression and suicidal thoughts. He started taking antidepressants. In August 2008, Chris came across a letter from his house managers posted on the front gate. The letter reported that they planned to return the following Tuesday to reclaim the house and other assets. The housekeeper said that when she showed Chris the letter, Chris appeared confused but remained silent. The nightmare that Chris had been avoiding had now become a harsh reality. He was on the brink of losing all his material possessions. The thought of Kirsty and Jill losing their familiar lifestyle was unbearable for Christopher. His family faced the possibility of returning to Wolverhampton, saying goodbye to their lavish lifestyle. For a proud man like Chris, such a situation would have been extremely humiliating. On August 21, 2008, a friend contacted Chris via text message to ask about his health, and he replied, "Not good, things are about to happen to me." On August 25, 2008, the Foster's family received an invitation to a barbecue and clay pigeon shooting event. They then joined the gathering. None of the attendees noticed any signs of difficulty in the Fosters. Witnesses recalled that Chris appeared happy. Their family still exuded happiness without knowing what Chris had planned that night. Chris informed Jill that he wanted to leave the gathering. Although Jill wanted to stay a little longer, they eventually left around 8:30 p.m., arriving home just a few minutes later at 8:44 p.m., their route captured by home security footage. Soon after, Jill went to bed. At 11:30 p.m., Chris went upstairs to check on Kirsty, urging her to go to bed while continuing to text a friend online. Around midnight, Chris decided to turn off the internet, causing Kirsty to end her conversation with her friend and go to bed. At 3 a.m., Chris began his violent rampage. He entered Jill's room and used a silencer to shoot her in the head while she was sleeping. Next, he went to Kirsty's room and killed her in the same way. Home security cameras recorded Chris's actions as he carried a shotgun outside the dog cage, killing each dog with a shot to the head. He then went to the stables and killed the horses before burning the stables with the animals inside. Chris appeared expressionless in the video. To prevent firefighters from reaching the house, Chris blocked the main entrance, shooting at the tires to make movement more difficult. He also pumped 200 liters of oil from the family's tank into the house's basement through connecting pipes. It is clear that Chris took deliberate steps to completely destroy the Bardstown house. His actions appeared to have been motivated by a desire to prevent others from acquiring property that he could not keep. Chris burned down his house and covered his car and belongings in oil. The fire quickly spread and destroyed everything. Chris, still carrying a rifle, went back into the house and lay down next to Jill's body in the bedroom, holding her as flames engulfed them. At 4:11 a.m., the security cameras stopped working. A neighbor saw the growing fire and called for help. Firefighters quickly arrived. The fire was too intense and difficult to control. As firefighters tried to put out the fire, neighbors watched the building burn, worried for those inside. In the following days, the media called in to search for Foster's family, but all efforts were unsuccessful. Because of Chris's wealth, the authorities opened an investigation, initially suspecting that the Foster family had been kidnapped. However, at the time, neither the bodies nor the security footage were found, so many speculated about what might have happened to them. It took 3 days for the fire to be completely extinguished. After the fire was extinguished, investigators carefully examined the house and found the bodies of Jill and Christopher on beds in a room that had collapsed into the living room. However, there was no sign of Kirsty. While some hoped she could have escaped, others feared she had been kidnapped. Sadly, Kirsty's remains were found in the rubble a few days later. Investigators used a brush to carefully collect her remains into a hearse. A fragment of Kirsty's skull revealed that she had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, like her mother. After examining the body, the police began to suspect that Chris had committed a crime. At the same time, they began investigating his financial situation. When they dug deeper, they discovered that Chris, a seemingly successful businessman, was actually heavily in debt. His total debt had reached £4 million, and when creditors tried to take his assets, they discovered that Chris had intended to demolish the house to ensure that there was nothing left for them to take. Security footage confirmed the police's suspicions. Chris committed the murders and took his own life without leaving any explanation or warning. Speculation about the motives behind the brutal crime led to 2 main theories. One theory had suggested that Chris, feeling ashamed of having lost his fortune, chose to commit the heinous act to avoid admitting his failures. Another theory had proposed that Chris, being self-centered, decided to destroy everything rather than face the possibility of loss. However, Enid had disagreed with these theories. She had firmly believed that Chris acted out of love for his family, trying to protect them from financial ruin. She had defended him and felt a deep sense of sympathy for his situation. In contrast, Chris's brother Andrew had held a very different view. Despite not speaking for 16 years, Andrew had briefly considered reconciling with Chris for their mother's sake. However, his fear of a hostile encounter had kept him from reaching out. Andrew had alleged that Chris had bullied and sexually assaulted him during their childhood, leading to a tumultuous relationship. Andrew had maintained that Chris exhibited bullying and controlling behavior. Andrew's attempts to reconcile with Chris in 1999 had been met with resistance. Chris had responded to Andrew's letter with a demand for a written apology, stating that Andrew would have to beg and scrape on bended knee to make amends. Andrew had believed that Chris refused to acknowledge his past wrongdoings and instead held on to long-standing grudges. For months after the tragedy, on December 19, 2008, a joint funeral had been held for 15-year-old Kirsty and 49-year-old Jill at their local village church. The service had been quiet and respectful, attended by close friends and family. Both Kirsty and Jill had been buried in the same plot, as requested by Jill's family. Chris had received a private funeral and was buried elsewhere. In the years following the tragedy, the remains of the burnt-out house and the family's charred belongings had been left on the site. These had included Kirsty's first aid book for her horses and a handwritten note detailing the family's meal plans for the week of the tragedy. The ruins of the house had remained until 2011 when the debris had been cleared. The 16-acre estate had been sold in 2014, with plans to build a new 6-bedroom house. Although the property had been put up for sale in 2012, it had taken 2 years to sell, reportedly after the price had been reduced. The reasons behind Christopher Foster's actions may have been financial struggles and the pressure to maintain a wealthy image. However, this had not justified the horrific outcome. Instead of having made sensible financial decisions or confiding in his loved ones, Chris had chosen a destructive path that had had devastating consequences for everyone involved. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Graciela Garcia. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1971, in Mexico. Her family was working class and they hoped to provide a better future for their children. As a result, her parents decided to move to the United States and eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. Graciela was too young to remember the hardships of the move. She attended Umatilla High School, a low-cost school where 66% of the student body was Hispanic. Graciela made friends easily and stood out with her outgoing. She later studied business at Blue Mountain College. However, since she was young, she has had a passion for hairdressing and has had the goal of owning her own hair salon. With passion and hard work, Graciela believed that her plans could come true with the right approach. By February 2006, she had become the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she quickly became famous in society. Moreover, her professional image also contributed to the prestige of the salon. She is passionate about her work and has a deep understanding of new beauty trends. Thanks to that, she always has a loyal customer base. Some of her customers have become close friends and are often invited to her home. She is respected and loved by everyone in town. Her private life is also filled with joy and happiness. She was pursued by many men when she was young, but she only loved one. That man became her first love. They have 2 beautiful daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, often called Gabby. However, that love did not last long. The man left the family. It seems that his feelings for her faded over time. Despite becoming a single mother, she did not feel hopeless. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and pursued a degree in cosmetology. After her divorce, Graciela met Romero Sanchez, a regular customer at the beauty salon where she worked. At first, their relationship was just a friendship. However, Romero later asked Graciela out, and she accepted. Gradually, their relationship became closer and deeper. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they felt uncomfortable because of his cold and distant attitude. Annabelle and Gabby, Graciela's 2 daughters, tried many times to connect with Romero, but he did not respond. Graciela's children were confused by such behavior, but they attributed it to personality differences. Graciela's partner seemed to be a strange and unapproachable person, which puzzled the people around her. They could not believe that a woman as full of life and fun as her could be so passionately in love with such a dry person. However, they still respected her decision. When Graciela announced her upcoming marriage, everyone showed their support and shared her joy. Especially Annabelle and Gabby, they wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests also noticed Romero's arrogance and conceit. Some thought he seemed too jealous when trying to steal all the bride's attention. When Graciella's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero treated them with contempt, making them feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, Graciella's relatives could not hide their true feelings about this man. Annabelle even openly stated that she did not consider him a stepfather and just wanted to maintain a normal relationship like other families. After the wedding, the Graciella family had 2 more sons, Arthur and Jacob. They moved in together at Graciella's house. Graciella's youngest son, Jacob, noticed that Romero began to act as if he were the sole owner of the house. Initially, Graciella tried to set personal boundaries, but because she did not like confrontation, she quickly gave in to Romero. He was hot-tempered and never gave in or apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciella continued to give in to Romero. However, over time, Graciella began to realize that she had rushed into this marriage. In conversations with her relatives, Graciella confessed that she felt constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and did not let her go anywhere alone. Despite this, Graciella never said she wanted to leave this abusive relationship. It seems she still loves him. Graciella's family gradually realized that she had become attached to the wrong man. Romero not only controlled Graciella but also lived off of his wife, much to her family's dismay. Romero was a skilled manipulator, constantly stalking Graciella, controlling her correspondence, and even threatening to break up the friendship between Graciella and her friends. He did not want to let her go anywhere, or sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, as if testing her loyalty. His jealousy became excessive and uncontrollable. She felt ashamed and self-conscious because of his behavior, and as a result, she limited her social life. She only communicated with her family and no longer connected with friends or colleagues as before. This seriously affected her work, as her profession required her to communicate regularly with clients and attend various events. Her friends and colleagues noticed a change in Graciella. She was no longer the cheerful and bright woman she used to be. She looked sad and tired, and she was clearly unhappy. Her children also noticed that she had changed in both her mood and appearance. They saw that she had lost her independence and confidence. After discussing it with each other, Graciella's family agreed that they did not like Romero. However, since he was Graciella's choice, there was not much they could do to change the situation. They could only respect her decision. Other relatives also expressed doubts about Romero, but no one knew how to help her in this situation. Graciella and Romero needed help with their relationship, and Gabby had mentioned this to her mother. However, Graciella believed that she would manage her personal life on her own. In 2018, Graciella decided to move her salon to her home for convenience. However, her family was skeptical as they had not heard about the plan for 12 years. Some customers commented that Romero's constant presence at the salon made them feel uncomfortable. Some people thought that Graciella moved the salon home to solve the problem, but others doubted that the idea came from Romero. However, Graciella was happy about the change and believed that working from home would bring her closer to Jacob and Romero. At the end of the year, she and her husband renovated a room into a beauty salon, completing it in May 2019. The salon closed shortly after, but Graciella's reputation remained intact, and rumors of her reopening attracted many customers, including new ones. Graciella was delighted with her career success, but became increasingly secretive about her personal life. However, after 17 years of marriage, Graciella and Romero decided to separate. Romero always kept in touch with their children and saw them regularly. Graciella and her ex-husband shared custody of their youngest son, while the other children were grown and living on their own, but they still kept in regular contact with their family and participated in family activities. Graciella went through the divorce with a calm and optimistic attitude. After the divorce, Graciella focused on developing her beauty salon and spent her free time taking care of her family and close friends. On the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero visited Graciela's eldest daughter, Annabelle, and reported Graciela missing. According to Romero, Graciela and he had been together the night before. However, when he woke up the next morning, he was surprised to find that she was no longer there. Romero tried to contact Graciela but received no response. Annabelle was shocked by the news and Romero's reaction. He cried and appeared distressed. This made Annabelle feel strange because Romero usually did not show emotions in front of them. Romero also said that Graciela had been acting strangely recently, even hinting that she might have found another man in her life. Annabelle felt that Romero's words were insincere and his tears seemed fake, which made her start to doubt his behavior and worry about her mother. Romero usually avoided communicating with his wife's children. But after a while, he changed and decided to connect with them. After Romero left, Annabelle decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Graciela's family gathers to find out what's happening to her. Graciela's car was parked in the driveway. If she decided to leave Romero, she would definitely use her own car. Another thing that surprised them was the neatness of Graciela's house. Everything was perfectly arranged and in order, far beyond normal. However, this was completely contrary to Graciela's personality and lifestyle, because if she went somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. Normally, Graciela would spend a lot of time in front of the mirror choosing her outfit for the day. However, the fact that she went out without any jewelry worried the whole family and they wondered why. As she walked around the house, Gabby noticed something strange. The large blanket had been put in the washing machine, something her mother never did. The blanket was too heavy and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero, which made Gabby suspicious. Romero did not explain this, saying that he did not pay attention to such details. But then people realized that several important items were missing from the house, including Graciela's passport, driver's license, and cell phone. This raised further suspicions about Romero's actions. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement at the police station and discovered something surprising. Although Romero had known about his wife's disappearance since the 9th or possibly earlier, he had not notified the police. Therefore, Annabelle was the first to file a missing persons report to her mother. Another incident raised concerns about Graciela's safety. She asked Gabby to pick her up, but even though Gabby said it would take some time because of the distance, Graciela continued to ask. Gabby was surprised by this unexpected request for help. Graciela explained that everything was fine and that her request was just a result of an argument with Romero. When they met, Graciela appeared relaxed, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry. She believed that arguments between lovers were just a form of renewal in their relationship. However, after they broke up, Gabby remained uneasy and became increasingly worried about her mother. The investigation began after Annabelle contacted the police. This caused the relationship between Graciela's family and Romero to deteriorate. Romero seemed angry that Graciela's family had notified law enforcement about her disappearance. Romero gave an official statement about his wife's disappearance. He said that Graciela either wanted to be alone or that she had moved in with another man and would be back soon. That was his answer every time someone asked. However, the police did not ignore this report. Officers launched an investigation into the missing Graciela's disappearance, considering the possibility that she may have been a victim of a crime. They started by searching her house, where her relatives reported that only a few personal items were missing, without finding any other suspicious signs. The investigation expanded to include interviews with her children, Romero, and other close family members, including her ex-husband. However, no useful information was gathered from these interviews. While everyone expressed doubts about Romero's behavior, he cooperated fully with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, answering questions, providing his DNA, and taking a polygraph test. Despite this cooperation, there was insufficient evidence to prove his involvement in the case. Further investigation revealed that Graciella's phone last sent a signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9 at 12:30 p.m. After that, her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media accounts showed no activity, suggesting that she had not accessed since her disappearance. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all the places she regularly visited were checked, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. The investigators found her disappearance to be highly suspicious, as it seemed she had vanished without leaving any clues. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston Police Department announced that they had found no reliable information about Graciella's last whereabouts. Although Romero had not reported her missing, he was not accused of any wrongdoing. Graciella's family became increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress despite their constant contact with authorities throughout the incident. However, as time passed, these updates became less frequent and eventually stopped, forcing Graciella's children to take initiative and contact the police station themselves to inquire about the status of the case. In an effort to reinvigorate the search, Graciella's family turned to the media in March 2020, seeking public assistance and attention. They hoped that by sharing their story, they might gather new information. Graciella's daughter Gabby was mainly in charge of communicating with the press. She expressed her family's increasing frustration with the lack of progress in the case and criticized the police for not keeping them informed for such a long time. She urged investigators to focus more on finding her mother, Graciella, and to take a closer look at the suspicious circumstances surrounding disappearance. Graciella's family suspected something was wrong, as the condition of her belongings was strange and unusual in her home. However, it was unclear who would want to harm her, as Graciella did not appear to have any enemies. The family also believed that Graciella would not have left on her own, as she would have contacted them to reassure. Posters and flyers describing Graciella were scattered throughout the city in search of clues to the case. Graciella, who is 49 years old, Latina, 1.6 meters tall, 62 kilograms, and with dyed blonde hair. Local residents were also asked to be vigilant and report any information that might help the investigation. Her children were so concerned that they asked for a new detective team to take over the case, as they suspected bias in collaboration with a suspect, Romero, who was acquainted with the original investigators. The Graciella family expressed concerns about several inconsistencies in the investigation, including the fact that Romero's phone was turned off on the day of Graciella's disappearance. Additionally, Romero's calm behavior raised suspicions, as it didn't with the typical reaction expected from someone whose loved one has suddenly gone missing. As a result, the Graciella family demanded that the suspect be arrested immediately. Police Chief Jason Edmiston responded to allegations surrounding Graciella's disappearance, confirming that her case is being treated as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, he emphasized that this is just one theory and that the investigation remains impartial, driven by evidence. Edmiston also dismissed claims of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as baseless. Edmiston noted that the spread of misinformation has hindered the investigation. Certain information must be kept confidential, and authorities have sought assistance from the FBI. The police chief expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions. Separately, Gabby organized a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move seen as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation. This perceived criticism suggested that the police were not doing enough to find Graciella. 1 year after Graciella disappeared, her family organized a memorial gathering. Here, friends and people who knew her shared stories about her lively and cheerful personality. They prayed for her safe return, lit candles, and later placed signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue the search for Graciella Garcia. In September 2023, a major development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez was severely injured in an attack, and that required surgery. There was speculation that the shooter was Mason Garcia, Graciela's brother. The attack suggests that Graciela's family had become frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation and took matters into their own hands, potentially leading to further tragedy. The disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in a state of agonizing. This has significantly affected the health and mental well-being of her family. Living without knowing what happened to a loved one can be more challenging than coping with a confirmed loss. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive or not. Her children continue to hope that the truth will soon be revealed and justice will be served to the criminals. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. She is a beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a cute smile. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, Justin suspected that he was not the father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, Justin took a paternity test in July 2010, which confirmed that Isla was his daughter. As a result, he was ordered by Child Protective Services to pay child support in December of that year. Trista and Justin agreed that Isla would be raised by Trista. Trista and her daughter live in Portland. It wasn't until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began visiting her. He lived an hour and a half away, and Justin would visit Isla during the day. Trista and Justin agreed that Justin could take Isla out, but not stay overnight. After a while, Trista got a new boyfriend, Raymond. Trista became pregnant, and in 2011, the family welcomed a new member. Trista would raise both children. Everything changed on October 13, 2011, when Trista met with Child Protective Services. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting remain unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave Trista a choice. Trista would go to rehab, or she would lose custody of the children. Trista immediately entered a 10-day rehab program and left her daughter with her mother and sister. Trista was determined not to lose custody. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista began rehab, on October 17, Justin and his family decided they wanted to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to adopt Isla. Child Protective Services quickly notified Trista's relatives of their decision. After being granted permission, Justin and his family picked up Isla but did not know her exact address. Child Protective officials provided the location through police officer Charles Weaver, who accompanied Justin and Justin's mother Phoebe to the home of Isla's aunt, Jessica. Justin's mother Phoebe waited in the car while Justin and the police entered the house to pick up Isla. A tense situation occurred. Isla's mother Jessica begged the police not to take Isla away and warned that she would not hand over the child to anyone. The police observed that Isla was very happy, constantly laughing and playing. However, when Justin appeared, Isla began to cry and tried to move away from him. Despite this, the police officer still handed the child over to Justin. When Isla was handed over to Justin, she struggled and screamed. She even tried to bite the officer. Child Protective Services supervisor Charles was told by the officer that Isla hated her father and that they could not give the child to Justin. But Charles said that it was not his decision. He was just there to carry out Child Services orders. For Justin to have formal custody of Isla, he would have to get the consent of Isla's mother, Trista, or go through a court process to have the child approved by a judge. In this case, there was no agreement or court process. Instead, the Child Protective Services supervisor's decision to place the child was valid. Child Protective Services Supervisor Charles gave custody of Isla to Justin. He then took Isla to the house in Waterville where he lived with his 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and Elisha's daughter, Gabriella. Justin, 25, lived in a large room in the partially finished basement, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. During this time, Trista called Justin every day to talk to Isla. On October 20, 2011, while Trista was in treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's case. Attendees included Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista and her sister Jessica, and their attorneys. Justin also attended the meeting by phone. The meeting resulted in an agreement that Isla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, immediately after Trista completed her drug treatment program. In addition, Justin agreed to take Isla to the treatment center on the 21st to visit her mother. Initially, things went well for Trista. However, the decision was reversed. In her desperation to get her daughter back, Trista called Child Protective Services several times to ask them to help enforce the agreement. Unable to reach them, Trista attempted to negotiate with Justin to reach a temporary agreement. Under the agreement, Justin would continue to care for Isla and Trista would be allowed regular visits. On November 12, 2011, Justin took Isla to the emergency room. After a doctor examined her, they determined that Isla had a fractured elbow. According to Justin, the accident occurred the night before, November 11th. It was raining at the time and Justin believed that he had slipped and fallen on her while holding her on the porch. Initially, Justin thought that she was not seriously injured because although she was crying, she seemed fine. However, it was not until the next morning that Justin noticed that Isla had injured her hand, so he took her to the hospital. By the following Monday, the orthopedist concluded that surgery was not necessary and that Isla's injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26, during Isla's 3rd visit, the specialist said that Isla's condition was improving and that she was slowly recovering. Trista was at the hospital to monitor her daughter's health. Never thought that this would be the last time Trista would hold her daughter in her arms. From that moment on, things went from bad to worse. Tired of fighting over custody, visitation rights, and even the right to talk to her on the phone, Trista filed a lawsuit to gain custody of her daughter. On December 15, 2011, Trista filed a lawsuit for custody of Isla. Custody of Isla was awarded to her just 2 days later on Saturday, December 17. Justin called the police in the morning to report Isla missing from his mother's house, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and sister Alicia. Justin assured them that the police had put Isla to bed the night before and that when they woke up, Isla had disappeared early that morning. Trista travels to a coastal town in Maine to visit her boyfriend Raymond. She falls asleep on the couch while Raymond's father, Robert, drives. When Robert received a call from Trista's father informing him that Isla was missing, Robert was shocked and found a suitable place to stop the car and wake Trista. Trista was still sleepy, but when she heard her father's voice herself, she began to understand that she had no idea where her daughter was. In desperation, Trista changed direction to look for Isla. The trip to the police station lasted an hour, but for Trista, it felt like a century. She called Justin several times to find out what had happened, but there was no response. When they got to the police station, both Trista and her father-in-law Robert gave statements. After about 30 minutes, Trista's father arrived at the police station with them, angry and upset. Justin called 911 on Saturday morning at 8:49 to report Isla missing. He said he last saw Isla the night before at 10 p.m., when his sister Alicia checked on Isla before going to bed. However, when they woke up the next morning, they discovered that Isla had disappeared from her crib. Justin suspected that an unknown intruder had taken Isla. News of Isla's disappearance quickly spread to the police, the sheriff told the media that the case was being actively investigated and their goal was to find Isla at all costs. Police continued to search the house for more clues. On Sunday, December 18th, police dogs were deployed and searched the area around the house where Isla was. Trista's house also underwent a thorough search. On Monday, December 19th, the FBI requested assistance in the search. By this time, 75 people from various agencies were involved in the search. The state police had seized 2 vehicles. One was a 1996 Ford Explorer, owned by Justin, and the other was a silver car, owned by Justin's girlfriend Courtney, who was also present on the night of the disappearance. On Wednesday evening, Justin made his first statement to the media. He was calm and claimed he did not know what happened to Isla. Justin also said that he and his family would support the investigation and do everything possible to find Isla. Justin said that Trista had agreed to let him raise the child. Justin also said that Trista was incapable of caring for Isla. As of day 10, a $30,000 reward has been offered for anyone who can provide a lead to Isla's rescue, and 330 leads have been followed. The operation also involved about 50 volunteers from the Search and Rescue Association. The sheriff has transferred the investigation to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. At that time, an announcement was made that the case was no longer a search for a missing girl but was being treated as a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin tried to avoid the media but later appeared more frequently. During an appearance on the Today's Show, Justin claimed that Isla had been kidnapped and wanted the kidnapper to return Isla. When asked about Justin's silence in the early days of Isla's disappearance, he justified himself by saying that he thought Isla would return. He also claimed that the police had advised him to stay away from the press. The police explained that this was only told to him at first. Later, the police encouraged Isla's parents to continue to appear in public. In late January, police revealed a major discovery. Isla's blood was found in multiple locations throughout Justin's home. In his 1996 Ford Explorer, they discovered a child seat in the back with Isla's blood on the left shoulder strap. In Isla's bedroom, police found blood on some of Isla's princess pink sneakers on the floor next to the crib, as well as on the doll's face and arms. This suggests that Isla may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood stains were concentrated in the basement. A pool of Isla's blood stained the center of the mattress that Justin shared with Courtney. Justin's sneakers were also found with Isla's blood on them. Police also discovered blood splatters on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls. These splatters matched Isla's height. Additionally, experts determined that some of the blood splatters in the house were likely caused by Isla coughing, suggesting that Isla's injuries were both internal and external. This suggests that Isla may have been severely injured and may have been brutally attacked. Police said the bed sheet was used to clean Isla's blood. When they learned this information, Trista and her family were shocked and could not believe it. Police warned them that the evidence that was about to be revealed would be even more horrifying. Luminol tests were performed on the house, revealing blood stains that were not visible to the naked eye. Photos taken at the scene left Trista in great pain. After viewing these photos, she left the police station in a state of panic. The police said there were more photos to show her, but Trista refused to see them. She said she had enough. According to reports, when police showed Justin and his family the photos, he had no reaction. After learning of the police information, Trista shared with the press that despite her feelings of grief and helplessness, Isla's father, Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. In September 2013, Trista wrote a bombshell letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had been given by the police. She was tired of waiting and wanted to rekindle public interest in Isla's case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. Alicia opened the door and the journalists asked about the blood evidence. Justin's mother explained that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been vomiting. However, a quick internet search shows that common symptoms of lactose intolerance are gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea, while nausea and vomiting are listed, but they are not the most common symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. Then, in 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead. Based on her father, Justin, reporting that Isla had gone missing on December 17, 2011, Trista and her attorney then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin. By that time, Justin had disappeared, and he and his attorneys denied any wrongdoing, arguing that there was no concrete evidence. Earlier this year, 2023, a judge granted Trista's petition to include Phoebe and Alicia in the wrongful death lawsuit. Justin is facing civil charges for murder. Additionally, Justin faces charges of breach of parental duty of care for a minor. Both Trista and her attorney know that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the goal of the lawsuit. Their goal is to get information and facts out. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. While Isla was with Justin, he called the friend who sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla a few weeks ago. It is worth noting that Justin stayed at this friend's house while detectives investigated Isla's disappearance. Claimed that Justin had not been involved in the child's life during the 9 months of pregnancy and when Isla was just over a year old. Trista also revealed that she had received strange messages from Justin on the day he brought Isla home. He mentioned being afraid that someone would try to kidnap or take Isla away. The last time he said something similar was around December 11th, 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After Isla went missing, the messages became more surprising and confusing. The end of the case. Poor Isla is still not found. Those responsible for Isla's death. Still no punishment. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Xavier Dupont de Ligons. Xavier Dupont de Ligons, born March 9, 1961. He is the eldest son of the French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Lignes and his wife, Genevieve. Xavier had a younger sister named Christine. Xavier's parents were very wealthy. Xavier's mother, Genevieve, claimed to have received messages from the divine, which she wrote down during her creative writing sessions. Her strange beliefs developed into teachings about the impending apocalypse, and she founded a religious sect called the Church of Philadelphia. The group consisted of members of the aristocracy, whom Genevieve believed would survive the apocalypse and participate in the renewal of the world. Despite his father's aristocratic title, Xavier had little interest in the French tradition. Instead, he was fascinated by luxury, high-end cars, and Xavier loved the United States. Xavier's lavish lifestyle was financed by his mother through substantial donations from members of the sect, who vowed to keep their activities secret. In 1974, Xavier met Emmanuel Teneur on the beautiful island of Bra. They formed a friendship based on mutual understanding and respect. It is said that at that time, Emmanuel confessed his feelings to Xavier, but despite his rejection, their close friendship remained unchanged. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnes Hodanger in Neuilly-sur-Seine, a suburb of Paris. Agnes was born on November 9, 1962, and Agnes was deeply religious. She worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Casse Catholic School in Nantes, where she taught catechism. Although information about Agnes' family is not widely available, there are many sources that indicate that Xavier and Agnes formed a very close relationship. The relationship developed into a short-lived romance before they decided to separate. In 1990, Agnes gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a non-coercive relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier got back together, rekindled their love, and decided to marry. Xavier adopted Arthur as his son. 2 years after the breakup, they welcomed the birth of their second son, Thomas, who was considered the heir to the family. To commemorate this important event, Xavier chose Emmanuel as the first person to support Thomas. After Thomas, the couple had 2 more children, Anna and Benoit. The family of 6 lived happily. Xavier showed himself to be a loving father, and his children excelled in school, opening up a promising future. Agnes passed on her faith to her children and took them to church. Around 2000, in accordance with their interests and wishes, Xavier moved his family to the United States. Xavier, a reserved, charismatic, and multilingual man, believed he could easily integrate into the United States. However, this project failed, resulting in significant financial loss. Upon returning to France, Xavier was left in a large amount of debt after several failed business ventures. Xavier was described as a salesman in some investigations. According to French media reports, financial problems had been a major concern for Xavier for many years. One of Xavier's failed projects was the importation of plans from the United States into French. In addition, Xavier also started a small business but found only limited success. These businesses included hotel and restaurant guides for sales representatives, a loyalty system for restaurants, and an association called the French Federation of Commerce. Xavier was also listed as the manager of another business that has not been clearly disclosed. Eventually, the business's accounts were few, and by 2003, Xavier had hired 6 sales staff. Xavier's work was often Monday through Friday and brought in less than $4,200 in reported annual income. The mounting financial problems began to strain Xavier's marriage, perhaps due to the usual disagreements in marriage. In 2004, Agnes wrote on a French forum about the challenges she and her husband faced, notably that Xavier had told her that the collective death of the entire family would not be a disaster. The financial situation worsened, and by 2009, the mounting debt had taken a serious toll on their relationship, forcing them to temporarily separate. During this time, Xavier sent Agnes several letters blaming her for the family's difficulties and the debts they were facing. This emotional stress affected Agnes, causing her to lose her sense of direction and suffer from insomnia. During this difficult time, Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who came from a wealthy family and had inherited a fortune from his father. Emmanuel was always ready to help Xavier financially. Emmanuel not only lent Xavier money, but also financed his trips and co-signed the purchase of a house. With Emmanuel's help, the Xavier family lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Nantes in the late 2000s. However, after settling down, the neighbors found Agnes to be stubborn and not easily put up with her husband. But behind closed doors, Agnes faced personal problems. She felt Xavier was too slow and unloving, and sometimes even abusive towards Agnes. She was also frightened by the way Genevieve, her mother-in-law, controlled Xavier. She described Genevieve as a mentally ill mystic and was extremely fearful. On January 20, 2011, Xavier's father Bernard died. Xavier hoped that his father's death would result in an inheritance, which would help him solve his financial problems. However, Xavier was shocked. When he went through his father's possessions, he found nothing of significance. The remaining items included a few pieces of paper, a rifle, a name tag, a ring, and some cash, which Xavier promptly took. A few hours after his father's death, Xavier withdrew cash using his father's card. On February 2nd, he obtained a gun license, and on March 12th, he purchased a silencer for his rifle. During this time, he practiced shooting a rifle in the garden, looking at a balloon on a support stand. Emmanuel visited and tried shooting, finding nothing unusual. Xavier explained that the silencer was to avoid disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, Xavier and Emmanuel went to a shooting range together, where Xavier's rifle was the focus of attention. The next day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times and they talked for almost an hour. Sunday, April 3rd. That night, Xavier, Agnes, and their children watched a movie and had a nice dinner at a restaurant. Everyone in the family was there, except Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic school and living in a nearby dormitory. After the outing, the family returned home and were seen by neighbors. Some family members also exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. That night, Xavier used drugs to put his wife and children to sleep, then shot and buried them in the garden. He did the same thing with the family's Labrador. Xavier called Agnes's workplace and said she was sick. He then contacted Arthur's school and said Arthur had been in a motorbike accident. He then contacted Anne and Benoit's school and said they were sick. In the afternoon, Xavier sent a letter to the restaurant where Thomas worked, saying that Thomas would resign because his father had been transferred to Australia. However, Xavier still had to deal with Thomas. On Monday, April 4th, Xavier contacted Thomas and had dinner with him at a restaurant near Thomas's university dormitory. After the meal, Thomas returned to his room exhausted. The next day, Thomas received an urgent text message from his father, saying that Agnes had been in a bicycle accident and was in a coma at the hospital, prompting Thomas to go to Nantes immediately. At midnight, a friend of Thomas's received a text message from him, saying that he was at home watching a movie with his father. Thomas was probably dead by then. About an hour later, Xavier emailed Emmanuel, arranging to meet up soon. Emmanuel responded, reminding Xavier that he had the power of attorney and the keys on the boat. Xavier went in and out of his house and even left a note on the door asking for no more mail to be delivered. Xavier then withdrew cash from an ATM, which was captured on security cameras. He paid with credit cards at restaurants and stayed at hotels under his real name. As Xavier's perfect escape began, the neighbors began to notice worrying signs. The once open windows of the bungalow had been boarded up for days. The 4 children of the Xavier family were no longer seen playing outside. The dogs were no longer heard barking, and Agnes was nowhere to be seen. All disappeared without a trace. Concerned neighbors began investigating and contacted the police. When police arrived, they discovered a nearly empty refrigerator with only a few jars of jam left. In the kitchen, a mop still had food on it, and a ring was placed on the living room table. Guitars were on the sofa, but no one was home. Police found empty picture frames, and the closet was empty of clothes. In the midst of the mystery, on April 9th, a letter appeared, sent to Xavier's family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been hired by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had gone undercover as part of a witness protection program, explaining why they had suddenly disappeared and had not communicated. Suspicion and concern grew among neighbors who sensed something was amiss. Fearing for the family's lives, they urged the police to investigate further. As the case gained media attention, more details emerged. On April 15th, security cameras captured Xavier entering a small hotel near Cannes. He parked his car, picked up a bag, and disappeared into nearby woods. This was the last time he was seen. Police returned to the family home Xavier on April 21, 2011. There, they discovered a new plot of land under the terrace. When they dug, police found the bodies of Agnes and her 4 children. Each had been shot 2 to 3 times and were wrapped in bags, covered with religious symbols, and carefully buried in sacks of quicklime. The family's 2 Labrador retrievers were also found buried. Despite a thorough search, no traces of blood, fingerprints, or DNA were found. Xavier became the most widely circulated person in France because of his alleged murder. His image appeared on every news bulletin. However, it seems that Xavier has mysteriously disappeared from the face of the earth. Autopsy results of 5 victims showed most of the bullets were shot in the head. In addition, traces of sedatives were found in the bodies of the children, which confirmed the hypothesis that they attacked while they were sleeping. A remarkable detail began to appear around Agnes. In the master bedroom, police discovered a device that Agnes used to control her sleep apnea, which had stopped working at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Because of the close relationship between Xavier and Emmanuel was called in for questioning by the police. Emmanuel cooperated with initial investigations. When Emmanuel was questioned about the exported rifle, Emmanuel initially knew about it. However, upon further investigation, the police discovered many inconsistencies in Emmanuel's testimony. They soon realized that Emmanuel was not being completely truthful. A crucial step occurred 24 hours later. Just before noon, Nantes police raided Emmanuel's apartment and seized Emmanuel's laptop. Emmanuel then revealed the real information about Xavier's export rifle. Xavier's mother Genevieve also attracted the attention of the police during their interviews. Genevieve was evasive and denied any knowledge of the Philadelphia church. The police investigation was fruitful. They discovered a copy of a complaint filed years ago by former members of the cult who fled in fear after Genevieve offered to have sex with all the men to conceive. This revelation about the cult, including the wealthy members who provided financial support, led the police to believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with material support. As a result, all former members of the Philadelphia church were questioned, and the police monitored the cult members, hoping to detect any indiscretions in conversations or emails. When the police examined the computer hard drive, they discovered many email exchanges between Emmanuel and Xavier. Some of the emails were particularly revealing about the relationship between the two. One email sent in the early morning of April 6 attracted special attention from the police. These accumulated details led investigators to the crime in which Emmanuel may have assisted Xavier in his escape. However, the police team's work has yielded results. They discovered a copy of a petition obtained years ago by former members of the sect. These people fled in fear after Christine offered to have sex with all the men to identify the chosen tie. The important revelation about this sect, including the wealthy members who provided the main financial support, has helped investigators better understand the work. They believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with the necessary support and substance. Therefore, all former members of the Philadelphia church were examined and followers of the sect were followed, hoping to find connections through conversations or emails. Despite efforts, no murder weapon was found. Xavier's cell phone records helped police track his movements in the country. Xavier's last known trace was recorded on April 15 from a security log. Based on the type of bag Xavier was carrying, police suspected that he may have been carrying a weapon. While everything suggested that Xavier might have committed suicide in the forest, the police conducted a thorough search of the dense forest, but without any results. This led to the hypothesis that Xavier might have sailed the boat to another country. Therefore, an international arrest warrant was issued on May 4. The Nantes police contacted the National Fisheries Monitoring Center to verify whether Emmanuel or Xavier owned a motorboat or a sailboat. The police did not find sufficient information, but Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for further questioning. When the police asked Emmanuel about the sailboat, Emmanuel claimed it was a coincidence. Emmanuel explained that Emmanuel had given Explorer permission to open his safe in case anything happened to Emmanuel, and that the key to the safe was hidden in a model sailboat in an apartment. According to Emmanuel, the safe contained Emmanuel's will. Despite some suspicious coincidences, the police released Emmanuel. At this point, Emmanuel was only considered a witness. However, the police decided to put pressure on Emmanuel because they suspected that Emmanuel was a possible accomplice. A key discovery was made when police examined all the checks paid to Xavier's company. A $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously undisclosed bank account in Monaco. Police quickly requested account records, but due to Monaco's strict banking secrecy laws, they would only respond to requests from their own regulators. On September 28, 4 police officers returned to Emmanuel's home. After a long wait, Emmanuel showed up. Emmanuel's apartment was sparsely furnished, with empty liquor bottles scattered around, suggesting that Emmanuel lived a very isolated life. Emmanuel told the police that Emmanuel had not received any letters or phone calls from Xavier. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier stating he was alive. However, after conducting handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses, the letter did not provide any new information. A tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier led police to raid a monastery in Rab Brun sur Aran on January 9, 2018. After a thorough 2-hour search, they concluded it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, on January 18, 2019, Emmanuel died of a heart attack. That same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Speculation has it that Xavier may be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where Xavier can help him avoid being noticed. Despite the passing of the years, the Church of Philadelphia still exists, with members who have been part of the church for nearly 40 years, living in seclusion from the world. Since 2011, the case has been shrouded in rumors and speculation, causing it to stall. Ultimately, Xavier was never found. The perpetrators responsible for the deaths of Agnes and her 4 children have still not been found.